All right. It's 7:01, so we may as well get started. So I would like to thank everyone for joining us tonight for the June 10th meeting of ANC 1A. At the top of our agenda, we will begin tonight with a minute of silence, reflection, and respect. And thank you. Moving into the official agenda, we start with community announcements, and I know that there's a lot going on in the community right now. So I will start with announcements from other commissioners. If you are an attendee or one of our neighbors and you have something to share, I believe you can raise your hand in the Zoom, or if you're on a phone, I believe *9 will also do that, so that we know to get you connected for your announcement. So starting with commissioners, do we have any commissioners that would that have something that to share with the community?
Well, I guess I would like to share. This is Commissioner Dottie Love Wade, and I'd like to add just something to our statement of solidarity. This is just from me. I don't represent the commission on this statement, but I stand firmly behind our mayor and all of the positive steps she has taken to unify our city, to keep us orderly, and to protect both the protesters and those who oppose our protests. So I would like to go on record as supporting her and the actions of the council in dealing with the situations that we've been confronted with this past 2 weeks. And to also thank the residents of the District of Columbia for the restraint that they have shown, the support that they have shared, and the openness that they have dealt with the problems that are facing not just the District of Columbia, but our entire nation. And I thank my colleagues on the commission for their support to me and all of the residents in our ANC commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Wade. It's very meaningful, and I appreciate it. Is there other news or statements from commissioners to share before we go to community members?
I do want to just make an announcement, and without having the ability to hand out the documents, I did want to share that Events DC has worked out an arrangement to disperse the funds set aside for our undocumented workers. There is a system that they'll be going through. I will say I've gone through the original document, and it does touch most of our direct service providers in our community. But I just want to let everyone in on this virtual meeting to know that that is about to be released. If you know anyone who may not be in touch with one of our larger organizations or even our smaller sub-grantees, the Family Place, LAYC, Next Step, Mary Center, most of the ones that you would think of are probably involved. Please reach out to me or any other commissioner. I've shared all the information with them, and they can help put your resident or individual who is in need of help in contact with the appropriate organization or help fill out that application. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Are there any other commissioners with statements, or should we move to community members? All right. Let me check attendees. Dom, is anyone in the community raising their hand, or have they requested to speak?
Nope, no one yet.
Okay. Hold on. I do see that we have a representative from the Office of the People's Council, Valka Valentine, that it would be beneficial for us to give her a moment to speak.
There I am. I just unmuted myself. How are you? And thank you so much.
Thank you. Glad to have you.
Oh, thank you. And I'll just say that there's a great relief fund that the Department of Energy is providing to eligible ratepayers for water. It's going to be available until July, up to $2,000 per customer if anybody's having any trouble with paying their water bill. And it's a great source. Also, the DC Water has scheduled some upcoming town hall meetings. And if you go to their website, you can see where and which ward the town hall meetings are scheduled. I think last month, I may have sent that to you, Ken. I don't know if you received that email that you might be able to share with your fellow commissioners. But if there are any other questions as such, if any of you or any of your other constituents or anyone at this meeting have any questions about the Water Services Division or any questions about utilities, we are here to accommodate you. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And can you put your contact information in the text so that everyone has it if they have those questions?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Should I put it in the chat?
I think if you put it in the chat, everyone will see it, and then we'll be able to put it into our minutes as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. I see Commander Emmerman has his hand raised.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Just here, don't actually have any formal announcements or anything like that, but I know that there's been some questions in the community, so just wanted to chime in and just say that we are here if there's any questions. Currently, we are continuing to see our downward trends in crime throughout our sectors, mostly related to people still being inside and not being out. But as we slowly make our progress into phase 2 and phase 3, I'm sure we will see a return to our normal activity out on the street. But aside from that, don't have anything formal prepared. Just want to make sure that we were here and present in case there were any questions for us.
Thank you so much. Do any commissioners have a question for Commander Emmerman? Does not appear so, sir.
Well, thank you all very much. I'm going to jump into my next activity here, but you all know how to find me if you have any questions, okay?
Okay, will do.
Take care.
And I'm checking with the representative from Councilmember Nadeau's office. I see she has her hand up, but she's also on the agenda a little bit later on. So I'm seeing she wants to take that opportunity now or later or both. Okay. It looks like we will give her a little bit more time when we get to presentations, so I don't want to constrain her to 1 minute. So with that, I don't see any other hands raised at this time. So let's move into committee reports. Commissioner Miller, do you have an education committee report?
Our last education committee was primarily focused on the budget, which we used to produce the testimony that we voted on at our last meeting.
Okay, thank you.
But I do want to announce that since we're through the budget portion of our evening, at least as far as the education committee is concerned, we will be using our next meeting on June 25th at 7 p.m. to introduce one of our new community partners, Junior Achievement, which will be taking over the old DPR headquarters.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. I would also say that when you have the details for that meeting finalized, if you could work with Dom or Zach or whomever to get them on our website, because I know that there's interest in that.
Yes.
Opportunity well beyond your single member district.
Yes,
it's an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, no, it'll be a community-wide for sure, and you can rest assured I will not be running the technology, so definitely will be a safe space. And Dom or hopefully Commissioner Ray will help me with that as always.
Okay, yeah, I see we've already got confirmation on that. Commissioner Bonneau, is there a public safety committee update?
Let's try again. How about now? Sure, thank you. Our last meeting was focused on mutual aid, and we were so impressed to hear from not only the overall Ward 1 mutual aid network, but Mutual Aid Movement is another mutual aid group here in our neighborhood, as well as the Spring Perry Neighborhood Pod. Whitney is actually one of the leaders in here at our ANC meeting today. So happy to share information if we do an upcoming newsletter or want to promote anything online about how neighbors can either volunteer time or money, but it's been amazing to see how these groups have stepped up and filled in where gaps in city services have been quite apparent, unfortunately. And our next public safety meeting will be July 16th at 7 p.m. in coordination with the Public Safety Coalition.
Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to Transportation Committee, Commissioner Rabarchak.
All right, so just like Commissioner Miller mentioned, last Transportation Committee was focused on FY21 budget, which we voted on at our special meeting last week. That was submitted, so thank you all for your input on that. Something to raise, our next committee meeting will be on June 23rd, which is a Tuesday at 7 p.m. It will be virtual, so check our website for the link to that. Something to raise, which Commissioner Ray saw, and I received some phone calls today, is that the 14th Street project is moving forward. My concern right now is that we submitted a multi-page document of comments to DDOT. We spent a lot of time. Thank you to all the commissioners who submitted those comments. I'm concerned now that, as you might have guessed, maybe those comments weren't well received by DDOT and implemented into the project. So I'm planning on sending around some messages tomorrow and looping in the affected commissioners as well into that. We still haven't seen a final plan of any of this, but it's moving forward. So expect to hear from me soon with that, because you know that's gonna affect a lot of people's lives in our neighborhood.
Yeah, Commissioner, and I know that you will do this, but if you could make sure that all the commissioners whose single member districts abut 14th Street in particular all get the same information. I know all of us deeply care about this and will be supportive, but I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to see what DDOT, shall I say, is doing. I want to say with us, but maybe it's not. Based on what you've said, it sounds like there's a lot that didn't get incorporated, and that's concerning.
Yeah. No, I will copy every commissioner that touches 14th Street. Absolutely. So
Okay.
thank you. Please keep an eye out for that. And yeah, stay safe.
Thanks. Commissioner Ray, Zoning, Parks, and Planning.
We held a virtual meeting last month. We heard 2 cases. One of those cases you'll see tonight for Columbia Road. The other is for Kenyon Street, and we had comments for Kenyon, and they've been sent back to work on those, and they will come back to the ZPP next month. So we will, or I'm sorry, next week on June 16th, we'll be reviewing again the 700 block of Kenyon Street to see what changes they've made. And we will also begin a discussion about the new roads that will be a part of the Park Morton redevelopment. We received word just this week that the development team needs to move forward with taking responsibility for those roads, and that requires an action by the council, and of course we get to weigh in on that. The PUD had a lot of elements that prescribed how the roads will be handled, but we'll sort of revisit that and see if any updates need to be made. And so those are the 2 things that I've got on the calendar for June 16th at 7 o'clock. You can see it on our website.
Related to that, and since you talked about Park Morton, I know you've mentioned this before as well, but could you give us an update on where they are with the soil samples for those who may not be aware?
Sure. We mentioned this at the special meeting last week, but I'll repeat that right now the development team is taking soil samples from all over the Park Morton residences in order to understand what the geotechnical issues might be that will help them decide what kind of foundations and footings would be necessary to handle both the buildings and this new road. So you may see, in fact, I know they're there this week already, large equipment on site taking those soil borings that go down some number of feet.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, moving on to presentations. The 2 standing, I know we call them presentations, but I kind of consider them perhaps extensions of the commission in a way. The representative of our council member and our mayor. So we'll start with Ali Bobak. Dom, if you can give her access to address us, that would be great.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
We can.
Great. I'm so grateful to be considered an extension commissioner. I really appreciate that.
You're all community partners.
Yes, of course. And I know I've been working with many of you this week, so definitely feeling that way. So we have quite a few updates. The council has been very busy. Oh, first let me introduce myself. I'm sorry. My name is Ali Bobak. I'm the Constituent Services Coordinator for Councilmember Nadeau. My number is 202-531-5186, and my email is abobak@dccouncil.us. I will also post that in the chat and say it one more time at the end of my presentation for those listening. So updates from Councilmember Nadeau. It's been very busy few weeks for the council and for the city and for the country, as we all know. I highly encourage everybody to go to briankenadeau.com and sign up for our newsletters. I'm going to just pull out some highlights for those for people who are on today who might not be signed up for that. The council member wrote residents to express solidarity with the African American community and reaffirm her stance and commitment to police accountability. That statement can be found on the website, and I can also post it. She also she was also able to present the Comprehensive Policing she voted for the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Emergency Amendment Act of 2020 that Councilmember Allen proposed. And in that, she was able to have language around tear gas included that was presented by Councilmember Grosso that was based on a legislation that Councilmember presented to not use tear gas. Sorry, that was very roundabout. But basically, Councilmember Nadeau presented a legislation against the use of tear gas. The language of the legislation was included in the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Emergency Amendment Act that was passed by the council yesterday, and that was presented by Councilmember Allen. The Emergency Act has quite a bit of measures in it to improve police accountability and transparency, and I encourage everybody to take a look at it. Also, as you know, yesterday the Metropolitan Police Department testified on their budget before the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. You can still share your thoughts on MPD's budget for the next fiscal year. The committee is convening a hearing on June 15th for public witnesses to testify, and the deadline to sign up is tomorrow, and I can post the sign up information. Finally, we're going to be having an annual public safety meeting. This year it's going to be a telephone town hall. The date for that is Wednesday, June 17th. It will be from 5 to 6 p.m. We would love to hear from ward residents about these issues, and we are going to focus on what residents would like to see in terms of balancing policing and community safety initiatives with the goal of creating a safer Ward 1 for all. We will also have community partners as guest speakers. The sign up will be going on our website, we believe, tomorrow. So that's brianneknadeau.com. And I'm also, again, going to post this, all this information in the chat, and I will also send it tomorrow, or as soon as we have a link to sign up, I will send it to all of the commissioners. That is all I have for now. Do you all have any questions for me?
I don't myself, although conversation may. It looks like Commissioner Ray may, and other commissioners may. So,
So, Allie, my only question to you is, I know, and I don't think you just said it. Maybe I missed it. In case I missed it. The law about DDOT and how they go about incorporating changes to the roadways, given the COVID-19 and whatever other issues we may be having right now. Will there be some kind of a communication to help explain that to residents, or how they might be able to work with us or others? Because I'm not clear on it myself, and I'm not sure if reading the legislation directly is going to be that clear.
This was Councilmember Che's legislation that you're talking about?
Yes, but I guess that's true, but I thought Brianne was also, or sorry.
Yes, so very supportive. I'm not sure what the communication around that will be like, but you know, our office is always happy to put it into terms that are more, you know, easier to work through and understand. So if you have specific questions, Commissioner, that you want to send to me, let's work through those together and make sure to get the information out.
And Commissioner Ray and Allie, if for this month's Transportation Committee as well, if you'd like to incorporate that into the meeting, I'm happy to have that on the agenda.
Sounds great.
okay, are there other commissioners with questions? And while I'm looking for that, if there's a member of the community that has a question, if you could hit *9 or raise your hand, we'll make that opportunity available as well.
I believe Layla
Chairman, I had a quick question.
Okay, sure.
Thanks, Commissioner Ray. Allie, something that was really great about the public safety meeting last year were the opportunity to stop at the different booths and engage with community members, which I can appreciate will be pretty challenging in a telephone town hall. I don't know if you have any more details about like if we're sharing the opportunity for organizations to sign up, what they could expect in terms of that participation.
So yes, and I know what you're saying, Commissioner, because in my former role, I was at one of those booths last year. So I think the way the telephone town hall is currently set up, you kind of have your set speakers and then you screen questions and have the questions come through. So at the top of my head, I don't think that could be easily facilitated. That being said, I'm going to take that question to our comms director and come back to you, because I definitely hear what you're saying in terms of having that more organic kind of community connections around public safety.
Yeah, I don't know what technology you all are using, but if breakout rooms or maybe like add-on meetings where people could sign up to have additional conversations or office hours with community partners. Just some things to consider. I know this shift to virtual can be a little challenging.
Yeah, no, those are some great ideas. It might be a little tight for this one, but let's keep thinking about that. You know, if it doesn't happen for this one, let's keep thinking about that together as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonneau. Any other commissioners with a question? Seeing none, and I'm not seeing any raised hands from our neighbors. So with that, we will move on. Thank you so much, Allie. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime. We will move on to Cynthia Tercios, our moker from the mayor's office.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much as well for considering me an extension to the ANC. Again, my name is Cynthia Tercios. I'm with the Mayor's Office of Community Relations and Services. My phone number is 202-553-8032. Sorry, I almost forgot those last two digits. And my email address is first name, CYNTHIA, dot last name, TURCIOS, at dc.gov. I'll also put that in the chat for those that are joining through the Zoom app and can see that. But my role specifically is connecting residents to various government agencies and addressing any concerns they have, and anything in between that, more than happy to help. But I just want to share some updates on what's going on across the city from the pandemic with COVID-19 to the rephased opening. So as of Friday, May 29th, Washington, D.C. officially entered phase 1 of our phased reopening. The following will entail the components of the first phase. I know that there are different things that will change as we enter different phases, but we have to keep in mind that the public health emergency is still in effect, and gatherings of more than 10 people are still prohibited. That means that if you see larger gatherings, we do recommend that people call 311 to report those, just to ensure that people are keeping a safe distance of at least 6 feet, still wearing their masks, as COVID-19 is still a concern. We also maintain that masks and social distancing and frequent hand washing are critical for keeping our community safe. The Columbia Heights Plaza does have a hand washing station as well as a restroom if individuals need a place to wash their hands as they're out and about in the neighborhood. So feel free to take advantage of that. And we do recommend that people go there. If there's ever any concerns with those stations, please feel free to let me know. I know I previously worked with Commissioner Roberchek. There was an issue with the portable bathroom, and now I'm working with DPW because there was graffiti on the portable bathroom. So if there's anything that goes on in between that, just let me know. And then at this time, non-essential retail businesses can operate with curbside or front door pickup only by customers that are ordered ahead of time or over the phone. We do not recommend at all that customers go inside. That's not allowed at this time, and retailers may apply for space for curbside pickup at coronavirus.dc.gov/phase1. So there is an application for curbside pickup that we are recommending that everyone goes through, because we do want to make sure that our local businesses are thriving and open at this time. Barbershops and hair salons may operate with stations at least 6 feet apart, and they have to be appointment only. But the following are still not prohibited. So any waxing, threading, or nail cares should not be open at this time. And the following parks and recreation spaces are now open: dog parks, golf courses, parks, tennis courts, tracks, and fields. But at this time, playgrounds, public pools, rec centers, and other indoor DPR facilities are still closed. As the phase reopenings continue, some of these locations may open. During phase 1, DC government continues to operate in a modified telework posture. The DMV at this time has the Southwest Service Center open for appointment for access to the following services: first time or conversion of a DC license and ID card. So if that means if you have an out-of-state ID card, you can go ahead and transfer that information to your DC address now. The knowledge test, as well as first time or DC vehicle tag registration. I know that that was a question that was brought up during last month's ANC, so that is now something that residents can go ahead and change at the Southwest Service Center. DC public libraries are now allowing curbside pickups for books that you reserve. So if you'd like a physical book, you can go ahead and reserve that and pick it up at specific DCPL locations. DPW is now opening their Fort Totten transfer station for all normal services, meaning your bulk trash, your food waste, your household hazardous waste drop-off, document shredding, and mulch pickup. And I just want to discuss summer 2020 a bit. So as we all know, SYEP has moved virtually this summer. SYEP is scheduled to start June 22nd with about 10,000 participants that will work with private and public sector partners. We want to make sure that our young adults are thriving through their SYEP jobs. So if there's any concerns that you all hear, whether it's technology based or anything in between, feel free to let me know. But I know that the various SYEP partners are working with the individuals to make sure that they have the tools that they need for their jobs this summer. And again, we're in phase 1 of reopening, and we are in the 9th day of sustained decrease in community spread. To enter into phase 2, we have to hit 14 days in order to go into phase 2. So that's looking like it'll be next Friday, but I will share any information that I get with the ANC. And lastly, there are new testing sites that have opened throughout the city, and I'm currently working with MOLA to get the information translated. I know that Commissioner Miller and I have been in contact about that, but various fire stations are doing COVID-19 testing, and the ones in Ward 1 at this time are Engine 4 at 2531 Sherman Avenue on Mondays and Fridays, and Engine 11 at 3420 14th Street on Thursdays only. So I think that some people were confused about that previously, but there's a distinction on what days the fire stations are providing COVID-19 testing. So I'll go ahead and share that information with you all too, so you have the flyer. I see your question about, is SYEP providing laptops or internets? I'll go ahead and get back to you with that information, Commissioner Klopp, but I do believe that the various partners are in communication with the youth that are working with their programs, or whether it's public or private sectors, to make sure that they have all those tools that they need. But if you hear of anything, feel free to let me know, and I'll make sure that I communicate with that individual and assist them in any way I can, but I'll go ahead and contact you as well. And if there's any questions, I can go ahead and answer them at this time. Sorry, that was a bit long.
No, that's fine. You had a lot to share. Commissioner Rabarczyk, I see you had your hand up.
Hi, Cynthia. We learned recently, you know, the mayor is lowering the baseline speed limit on residential roads from 25 to 20. And we saw a tweet today that a lot of the 20-mile-per-hour signs are being printed in the DDOT sign shop. Do you know when those are going in, and if there are any other roads that are not being lowered to that limit, what the cutoff is? Like Georgia Avenue, 14th Street, 16th. Do you know what falls under this?
So at this time, just local roads are being labeled as the ones that fall under the 20 miles per hour. I know that the signs are going up in the next few weeks. They've all been printed at this time. I know that the 15-mile-per-hour areas that are in Ward 1 specifically, those signs are going up now because they have been identified. I think in the next few days, DDOT is putting those up. But as soon as I get the date for when those signs are being posted officially for the 20 miles per hour, I'll go ahead and send you that information.
Thank you, Cynthia. Are there any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Bundy, and then we'll go to Commissioner Miller.
Hi, Cynthia. Thanks for sharing this information. Was excited to hear about the COVID testing at firehouses. I was curious what type of COVID testing that would be. I know there's certain tests where you get your results, you know, within minutes or at least that day. I wasn't sure if you knew when folks were going to be able to get the results. Should they go get a test?
I will get back to you with that information. I know that the testing site that's at Judiciary Square, so it's not a firehouse, but the one that they just opened, I think in between F and 4th and 5th Street. That's a few days. I'm not sure if the fire departments are also going through that few-day process just to verify the first. So the way it works is you get the presumptive positive and then the confirmed positive. So I know that that's usually the delay in getting the confirmed positive, but I'll get back to you with what the time period is for the fire stations.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Miller, I believe you had a question.
Yes. Hi. Thanks, Cynthia, for following up on all that stuff. I was curious, the 15-mile-per-hour speed limit, I'm assuming that's going to stay the same around our schools?
Yes, that's not changing at this
Okay.
time.
And do you know if the alley speed limits will be lowering as well?
I don't believe that's changing, but I'll get back to you if that is.
Yeah, I didn't hear that it was, but I did have questions about that, so I thought I'd ask.
I didn't either, but I'm happy to talk to you about those questions too.
Yeah. And if I can just throw out, since you did mention that our tennis courts are now open, as part of the 16th Street Powell Park renovation, they did complete the upgrade or the update on the tennis courts. So they're open now. You can go take advantage of the new surface and brand new nets and weed free and chair free. It's very lovely. So just wanted to let folks know that that was happening. The park is still in process.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Miller. Are there any other questions for Cynthia? Are there any questions for our MOCR from community members? If so, press *9 or raise your hand. All right, seeing none. Thank you so much for your time, Cynthia, and thanks for sharing all those updates. That was wonderful.
Thank you so much. I'll be on the call if anything comes up.
Perfect. Commissioner Rybarczyk, would you like to take roll call?
Of course. Okay, Commissioner Bonneau.
Present.
Commissioner Edmondson.
Present.
Commissioner Rybarczyk, present. Commissioner Goldschmidt.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Present.
Commissioner Castagnon.
Present.
Commissioner Bundy.
Here.
Commissioner Bass.
Present.
Commissioner Ray.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Love Wade.
I believe we're trying to get her back right now.
Okay, I was gonna say was
Yeah,
here,
she
not
may have
here
dropped.
anymore. Got it. And Commissioner Clock.
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Commissioner Rybarczyk. Commissioners, if you could review the agenda that was distributed earlier today, and let me know if there's any additions, deletions, or corrections. Okay. Commissioner Miller?
Sorry, I may not have the most recent.
Okay, I could read off quickly what's on the
I just
copy
wanted
that was.
check on the consent agenda that we have the vote to amend the status of our previous grants.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Dom, for posting the agenda. If you could make that a little bit larger for the consent, since that's where there's a question.
And just so everyone knows, it's also on our website too, in case it is too small.
Thank you. Oh, see, thank you.
The only thing not showing on the consent is the number 5, which is the letter of support for the preservation case at 3149 16th. Yeah, there we go. Okay, having heard no edits or corrections to the agenda, I would move that we accept the agenda as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Having it made first and second, all those who vote aye, either raise your hand if you're online or say aye if we can't see you.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The vote is unanimous. I appreciate that. Moving to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, as was shared earlier, the first item is approval of the prior minutes of May 2020 and June 2020 special meeting. Next item is reimbursement of ANC communications expenses, which is the monthly Zoom webinar license fee for May and June 2020. Third item, amendment changing a previous grant award to Jordana Marana for the Columbia Heights cleanup to an ANC 1A sponsorship of the event. Next is the amendment changing a previous grant awarded to Ernest Johnson for the Columbia Heights Back to School event to an ANC 1A sponsorship event. And the last item on the consent agenda is for 3149 16th Street, the letter of support for the historic preservation case, which is, we reviewed that case in the Zoning, Parks, and Planning Committee. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as mentioned.
Okay, what, Commissioner Miller, you were going to say?
Sorry, I just need to ask for one change to that consent agenda, which is to just put Commissioner Rabarchek's name as the recipient of that reimbursement, please.
Okay, so that doesn't change the items.
Thank you.
That's fine.
And also one other small change, which is Jordana Miran. There's no A at the end of it.
Okay.
Just for.
I accept the small amendments to the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Wade. Okay, so there's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in support of the agenda, consent agenda, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Ayes have it. Thank you so much. Moving on to official business. First item is 753 to 755 Columbia Road Northwest, BZA case 20270 through 20272. Commissioner Brown, this is in your single member district. I believe Commissioner Ray's committee reviewed this. Whichever one of you wants to take the lead in introducing it, just let me know.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I worked with Commissioner Ray and several members of the community, as well as the developer on these several properties. On the 700 block of Columbia Road, and if you're familiar with the Bruce Monroe Park, it is this particular property sits behind the park, adjacent to the community garden. It involves the development of 2 row house dwellings and an addition on the vacant site that's directly behind the park. And so we've had a couple of meetings with the developer and also hosted a meeting with members of the community living on that block. And so we've agreed to move forward. And I believe we have the developer on the Zoom meeting. Is that correct, Commissioner Ray?
Yeah, Alexandra Wilson I see is on, and so is Ram Design. Alexandra, can you try sharing your screen? If not, we may need to promote you to a co-host.
I think Rami, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. I think Rami, the architect, was going to present the plans.
Okay, well then we would need to promote Ram Design, I guess, to co-host.
Is that okay? Yeah, can you do that, Rami?
Yeah, and if you can, Commissioner Ray, feel free to share any remarks. You know, take a note of a couple of concerns of the community, which I'll raise, but definitely would love for you to move forward with the presentation and share some details about what you're proposing to the BZA. But Commissioner Ray, do you have anything that you want to share?
I will just quickly for those on the community that haven't seen it yet, and I'm hoping we can get the slides up eventually. But this property, it's 4 contiguous property lots, four of them. 3 of them are part of the actual case and require some form of BZA approval because they are going to add 3 units at each. There is 1 lot which does not require a BZA case because they're only adding 2 and they don't require any further forms of relief. So as we see these slides, it's going to look like one larger building, but it's really 4 buildings that are right next to one another. The community did have a few concerns, but I'll let Alexandra or Ram talk about what actions they've taken since the meeting we had last, if they could.
Sure, I can speak to that. So we presented at the ZPP, and I'd say the majority of the comments were related to pest control and trees. So the owner addressed that, and they actually have a service that's coming out at least twice a month. And we've been working with urban forestry to protect the tree while making sure it doesn't create any damage to anyone walking. And I don't see the plans up yet, but essentially we're asking to convert 3 row buildings to 3 units, and we're asking for a waiver from the 10-foot rule. And oh, there we go, we got it up. So I'll turn it over to Rami. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. Everybody can hear me?
You're a little faint.
Is that better?
Rami, do you want to share yours?
Much better.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Rami Ali from Ram Design, the design architect for the project. Last time when we met, I went through the full presentation of describing all the details of the site and the architecture. I just wanted to see if we can just go over the same thing, or we can just go over the changes that were made. I'm fine either way, but I can provide a summary if that's okay. As Commissioner Brown knows, that we presented this project back in 2016 and went through the process of getting the BZA approvals. The previous owners sat on the project for quite a while up until the BZA order expired. So that's why we're going back to the BZA requesting the same, requesting the relief from subtitle E to 05.4, which is the 10-foot projection beyond the neighbor's wall. But we took the advantage of tweaking the design to make it a little bit more better from the previous design. I can just name a few of the items that we tackled to make it a better project. We have set back the buildings to be aligned with the remaining of the block, as the previous design was like projected 20 feet to the front. The current design has been set back to flush with the remaining of the block. We have retained the existing front porches. We're gonna restore them to a brand new condition. We have set back the 3rd floor addition so that we can have a continuous roof line. This way, those 4 buildings don't have to break the roof line from the remaining of the block. So the roof line continues as 2-story buildings, and the third floor is set back by at least 8 feet. And we introduced a new architectural element, which is the clay shingles, just to top up that squared parapet. However, we even though we shrink the footprint a little bit, but we still maintain the big size units so it can attract more of a family-oriented owner or tenant for the building. So the units are basically ranging from 1,200 square feet to around 1,900 square feet, 3-bedroom, 3-bath units. And that was, the main program, that we want to keep them as more family-oriented. The footprint is slightly smaller than the previous design. However, the back extent is almost the same, giving the push that we did from the front, because we have set back the buildings 20 foot backwards. And another element that made us push the building backwards is the front tree on the 755 Columbia front yard. which we were advised that this tree is going to be, a big thing to take out, but we are recommending to trim it down. There's kind of, this particular subject about the tree is still going back and forth. The owner can speak more to it as he's been talking with the arborist on this one. But that was one of the main reasons we pushed the building backwards. As far as the architecture, the front, the cover page can speak a lot that we're doing the existing front brick double hung windows, the front porches, which is very common along this block and most of DC out of fund zones. And the third floor, as I mentioned, is set back so that it doesn't, break that roof lines. As far as the backyard, we are applying for an easement where we can open up all 4 backyards, giving its one development. It's for the individual projects, but it's been done by the same client. So we have the advantage of applying for an easement and combining all the backyards together. This would allow us to provide more parking space in the back. I believe Exhibit A1 shows a site plan where we can, that shows that we have maximized the parking in the back and also kind of created like some sort of like amenity for these projects. Other than that, that's basically it. We tried to be a little bit more modern on the back by having more natural light coming in, giving the lot are narrow and deep. So we wanted to bring more natural light in, and this was the driving factor to slightly modernize the back of the project. The renderings are not up to date. However, all the drawings in the package are up to date, but we just left the renderings till the very end, which requires a little bit of tweaking. And the only thing I recall was an Office of Planning comment that were objecting to the glass railing on the roof deck. They were referring to that railing as, we were calling it as a parapet, which complies with the code, but since it's been called as a railing, they don't want to see that flush with the exterior wall. So we were basically going to update that rendering to extend the exterior material on the back to go up by 3 foot 6 inches and get rid of the glass railing on the roof deck. That would be the only change that we have on the back facade. We also received a few comments from ANC and from OP regarding the front facade, for there was some inconsistencies between the front facade elevations and the renderings. We also updated the elevations since the previous meeting by centering all the windows to match the the renderings. Another item that we responded to was the front porches. We kind of got 2 different opinions on the front porches. Few comments, they were advising that we kind of have a break between those front porches so that they can read as 4 different row houses. But giving the roof lines, we cannot alter the front porches. And we have some photographs that we provided in that email showing that the existing front porches, they have like a 12-inch clear between them, but however, the roof lines, they touch. So me personally, I would like them to have a break, but given the black color that we have, it's making it look like it's continuous. There will be a couple of inches in between those front porches. However, I cannot spread it too much to avoid having a zoning comment saying that we cannot alter the extent or the size of the front porch. This is basically what I recall as far as design changes that we did since the last meeting. Few specs that I found on the emails regarding the front yard, existing stone walls along the sidewalk, that we will be replacing all the stone along these planters in the front, and we make them all consistent. We're just having one question with that we need some more structural input on it. That the one of 755 Columbia front wall, the stone is been replaced with concrete, And I believe that's because of the tree roots are pushing towards that concrete wall. We're going to be looking further into this, but the intention is to replace all of these stone walls along the sidewalk to match. And I believe this is all of the comments that we got as far as design, other than the shade and shadow study that we have revised the shade and shadow study to show them as individual per project, not as a combined project. Other than the March months that we see, there is an impact towards the very back, the backyards and the alley that will slightly impact 759 and 761 Columbia towards the very end of their backyards where it touches the alley. Remaining of the months, they're fine, but March is the only one that we see, even though it's minimal, but it's still an impact at the backyard touching the alley. And that's basically it, that what we have done since the last meeting. If there's any questions, I would love to answer.
I have a point of confusion. Yes, this is Commissioner Wade. I have a point of confusion as far as the lots are concerned. Are you indicating that zoning and planning are permitting you to consider the lots as one, the 4 lots as one for parking purposes, but 3 for developmental purposes?
I'm sorry, you breaking up. Say that again, please.
Okay. So my question has to do with the parking in the rear, the lot.
Yes.
Am I understanding correct that planning and zoning are permitting you to consider the 4 lots as one for parking purposes, to make sure you have sufficient spaces, but they're only considering the 3 lots for zoning? And is that permissible? Does that work?
No, as far as zoning and planning, there will still be read as 3 independent lots. However, because we cannot locate a parking space that would overlap over a property line, that's why we are applying for an easement. Usually we submit the recording of that easement as part of our supporting document to the Office of Zoning, and that's based on that we are approved to provide the parking layout that we have now.
So you were approved?
No, see, the easement is basically recording it through the attorney and submitting this documentation to the Office of Zoning, but we are not combining the lots in the back. They are still read as 3 individual lots, and there always will be. It's only an easement for a parking space to park partially on 2 lots. But
and you don't see any problem with obtaining the easement?
No, we've done
because if you don't obtain the easement, then your parking plan is askew.
If we don't obtain the easement, we would lose 1 parking space, because the advantage that we're getting here is we're adding the parking space that you see at 757 Columbia.
Let me add this, since I know we don't have Marty. I don't think we have Marty Sullivan on here, so I'll put on my Marty Sullivan hat. The lots need only be 18 feet wide and have, I think it's 1,300 square feet of total space. So given what I'm seeing on the A1 chart, they shouldn't have any problem getting the easement in order to do that, because the lots that are here are a minimum of I believe of the 18 feet, and they go up to, is that 28, if I'm reading that the right way?
And I'm happy to jump in. It's Alexandra Wilson. I'm Marty's associate. And yes, the subdivision is permissible, and the easement is a separate issue. And we are guaranteed to get the easement because it's essentially against the property and the property owners granting it to himself. So that's a completely separate issue done through the Recorder of Deeds office, and we should have no issues with the easement.
Okay, thank you.
And my apologies, Ms. Wilson. For some reason, I was thinking you were the architect on this. That's a different.
No worries.
Different Alexandra Wilson I'm thinking of.
No worries whatsoever.
Yeah.
This is Commissioner Brown again. There's a lot of back and forth with the community about sharing the findings of the shade study. Were you able to follow up with the community about their concerns, particularly the the property that you've highlighted that would experience minimal impact?
We provided the previous on the previous meeting. We provided that share and shutter study right after the meeting. I don't know if that was shared with the neighbors. The only difference was there's no change to the results, but it's only like splitting the buildings. As far as us as RAM Design sharing it and discussing it with the neighbor, I did not meet with anybody. I don't know if Alexandra have had any correspondences with the 759 and 761 in this regards, or got any comments, but I haven't gotten any comments on this particular issue.
We have not received any comments. I sent individual notices to, I think, at least 10 or 12 surrounding neighbors, and gave them my phone number, my email, and then the owner's phone number and email. I sent them the link to the website, and we sent the most recent shadow study to the Pleasant Plains chairperson. So we've done as much outreach as possible without, short of knocking on doors because of COVID, and we still haven't heard anything.
Okay. It was the chair of the Pleasant Plains Civic Association. So if you shared that with him, didn't hear back, then I'm fine.
He did confirm it. I saw the message where he thanked them for having received it. So I will assume he's with it now.
Great.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I think this is for Commissioner Ray and Commissioner Brown. Firstly, this is a variance going from 2 to 3 units in each of these lots? Is that right?
Yeah, it's a special exception to go from 2 to 3.
And is that because there's enough square feet on these lots to make it a special exception, or is it always a special exception?
It's 3 is always a special exception, but you do need to have enough square footage to make that work. And in this case, they do. The lots here are very deep.
I see. And is that our rationale for supporting the 2 to 3 units? I think that this commission knows that. I think I may be the most skeptical on the commission about allowing these formerly 1-unit row houses to be turned into 3 units under this, I think, insane fiction that families are going to move in. What is the ZPP's rationale, and for Commissioner Brown, the neighbor's rationale for wanting to move to 3 units in each of these lots?
Well, I would say that the ZPP, I think, has been pretty consistent in that in cases where they can, where they apply, where they have enough square footage, that we've not had a problem with it, provided that it doesn't create some sort of, the rules say it can't unduly burden the neighbors with light and air. It can't change the feeling of the zone. It has to be in keeping with the neighborhood character, that sort of thing. And, for the most part, given the changes that they've planned to make, the breaking this up a little bit to make them look like individual row houses, it meets with everything that I think we've done before, including in your own neighborhood.
Yeah, and if the ANC recalls, for those commissioners who are on the ANC, either it was Alexandra was explaining earlier that this particular these 2 particular sites in the lot have gone through the ANC before, and a special exception was requested. And I don't recall if we were able to vote on those properties, but we were able to show some support for it. So just wanted to share that background.
So just one follow-up. Is it fair to say, Commissioner Ray, that we support these special exceptions because we assume that the BZA, that the standard is so low that the BZA will grant the special exception, and that our opposition will be
I'll speak. Speaking personally, I would approve these projects because I believe that additional density in this particular neighborhood, especially just off Georgia Avenue, is advantageous to Georgia Avenue. I mean, I have had multiple conversations with the main streets in that we don't have enough foot traffic in order to maintain the businesses along Georgia Avenue. So some additional density in this area of the neighborhood is definitely warranted. So in a case where they can meet the parking, the design doesn't have a significant impact on the neighborhood, I would be in support of those projects probably across the board. You know, I'll wait and see if I see one that I don't like. But in this particular case, I think they've done a very good job.
Although if I may chime in to address part of Commissioner Goldschmidt's question, I don't think we should ever vote to support something with a presumption that the BZA is just going to support it anyway. I think that's a defeatist attitude, and that kind of diminishes why, excuse me, something would come before us at all. I think that on a number of issues recently, we've learned that the BZA doesn't always get it right. And so regardless of how we think the BZA may weigh in, I think we should have more, I mean, it needs to be balanced, but I think the balance is between a principled position and a good outcome, which is why we review these cases case by case rather than making a blanket position for all of them years before they come before us. So I would say that. And to Commissioner Ray's point, I do think that some of the lots between Georgia Avenue and Sherman in particular are much larger, and maybe it's not width, but definitely with depth, than we get east of Georgia or even west of 11th Street. And they create some interesting opportunities for perhaps supporting a little bit more without, I think in many of our row house neighborhoods, if we were to talk about converting 2 to 3 units and add parking, we would also be talking about eliminating all of the outdoor space entirely. That's not what happens in this strip. In this strip, you're able to get your off-street parking, you're able to get your density, and you still have usable rear yard space, just because the lots are so insanely deep. So I think that is a factor that weighs into it at some point.
Good answers. Thank you, guys.
We love you throwing those hard balls at us. I mean, that's why you're here, Commissioner Goldschmidt.
If I may, Commissioner Brown, was there any discussion about the neighbors about the uniformity of the front facade? I feel like it doesn't really feel like individual townhouses to me. I know they're putting a little more space between the porches, but if the back is beautiful, but the front just seems like it's a very modern, contemporary building. It doesn't feel like individual row houses. Does anyone have any concern about the uniformity?
Yeah, I don't think that there is a concern about the design in relation to the individual row houses. I think that the architect did make some changes to the design to keep up with the consistency within the character of the neighborhood, the design of the abutting properties, and ensuring that there is a seamless design across the properties. So I think that the neighbors were more concerned about, and I think Ram and Alex explained this earlier, more concerned about the upkeep of the buildings because the 2 properties that exist there have a lot of issues. There's a lot of blight issues with the property that's, with the lot that's vacant. And I think that they were more concerned about that and had less concerns about the design.
Thank you very much.
Ray, I don't know if you want to.
No, I think that that was exactly, you're absolutely right. They were more concerned about upkeep. And those homes are unfortunately very distressed. So I'm glad to see them being redone.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Or are there any questions.
With their hand raised.
Yeah, I'm looking at the attendees now to see if there's anyone with a raised hand. And thus far, I don't see anyone, but all right. Are there any further questions, or is there actually interest in a motion?
There are any other concerns? I can't.
Well, I guess that in a way that's my question to you, Commissioner Brown. Do you think that this project has had enough vetting and community input that we can move to a motion, or are there additional outstanding questions that maybe we're not aware of?
I do not have any outstanding questions. I think that this property has been reviewed and vetted through the zoning committee, and we also had a couple of meetings with the developers and walk through designs with the community. We also got the Civic Association engaged and involved in this particular development, and I think that especially with the issues with the blighted properties and maintenance, I don't want to hold it up any further. And I know that the developers have a zoning case hearing coming up this month. So I'd like to move this forward.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Brown. You've moved to approve this. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Dottie's a pretty fast draw. You got to try harder than that, Commissioner Ray. Well, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, either raise your hand or say aye.
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 Aye. Oh, sounds like any abstentions? Any opposition? It is unanimous. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next item, this is more of a discussion, really. There's a house in my single member district that's being renovated into, I think, 2 units from a former row house. And I just wanted to bring this up to see how the commission feels about it. I know how I personally feel about it, but sometimes I get a little emotionally invested, and I want to make sure that this is more of a policy-driven issue. So to give as briefly as possible the background, what happened is the developer who also did the house next door, and there were problems with that one, which is why it was even on my radar. At the end of 2019, it came to my attention that they had removed the mansard attic story in the dormer windows entirely. So everything above the cornice was gone, and it's a corner house that had a mansard on the east and south side. As we all know, in the RF1 zone, the regulations are quite clear that you shall not remove original architectural rooftop elements, period. The path forward to do that is with a special exception that would come before the ANC and come before the BZA. And I brought this to the attention of DCRA on December 30th of 2019. It resulted in a stop work order. DCRA just can't seem to help itself. They vacated the stop work order at the end of February of 2020, which was a surprise to me. And when I raised the issue again, it resulted in another stop work order because they had inappropriately removed the stop work order, at which time the developer has now constructed a 3rd story. And the story that what the shuck and jive I was getting from DCRA the entire time is, oh, it was too distressed and they're going to replace it in kind. Well, it's impossible to replace in kind a 100-year roof, especially when all those materials are in a landfill. Just not possible. So where I am right now is on June 1st, Matt LeGrant decided that he had authority to reissue the building permit based on the fact that he believes, based on the evidence that the developer gave him, that the roof was in such poor condition that it just couldn't be saved. I I think that's very interesting because no one got to see the roof before it was removed. I don't know what documentation someone could have taken to prove that they were doing something when they knew what they were doing. They were getting around DCRA. So why you would take photographs is beyond me. But it gets to the point that, again, the zoning code says shall not be removed. It doesn't say shall not be removed unless in poor condition. It doesn't say that the shall not be removed unless there's a really good reason or something compatible is substituted. It shall not be removed. It's resolute. So my question is, do we care about this? And if so, do we file a BZA case challenging the zoning administrator for exceeding his authority?
Well, you know how I feel about it, Kent. I think that they disregard us, they disregard our great weight, and they pretty much let developers do whatever they feel is in at the particular time. It doesn't seem as if they pay attention to our own guidelines. They don't pay attention much to the zoning guidelines that we worked so hard to put into effect. I would absolutely challenge this, and I would also challenge the administrator for exceeding his authority. I think we can't permit these kinds of behaviors to just continue, because then they have a precedent. It's been set for them, and so they can always point back to this particular case where it was permissible. So if the law is absolute and resolute in that it shall not be removed, then it should not have been removed. He should be required to replace it. And whatever expenses that he incurred for disregarding our city laws, then that's on him. And I feel very strongly about that, Kent, and I'm supporting you 100% on that.
Thanks, Commissioner Wade, because it also gets to a point where I'm thinking, recognizing that, I mean, I know I'm kind of threading the needle on this one, but recognizing that there is just no way that they can replace what they removed. And so I recognize that whatever the outcome is, it's not going to be what should have never happened to begin with. And I'm realistic enough on that. But at the same time, I feel that in this case, there was a very concerted effort to work around the law so that they could get what they wanted without having to do the right thing. And so I'm kind of to the point of, you removed something from the community that never should have been removed. So what are you giving back to the community of equal value? Maybe it's how they reconfigure the roof. But again, it just seems insulting to me that Matt LeGrand would just say, well, they've already kind of built this and it's not so bad. And they tell me it was in really bad shape. I mean, the whole point of the regulations is to have the community and the ANCs have a conversation about what is an agreeable path forward. And this just seems to just completely be dismissive of that entire role.
Chairman, if I'm looking at the right house, Google Street View has a very good view of the roof, so it could be reconstructed, I would think. It doesn't look like there. So I would say they could be forced to put it back, and they should be forced to put it back.
Yeah, they could be forced to recreate something reasonably similar, but that's not their intent. Like, it had a mansard on the south side as well as the east side. Right now, and it was very interesting when I was getting the stop work order, when I was getting the inspectors out that resulted in the stop work order getting re-implemented, I strongly feel that the developers knew something was going on or got tipped off, because I've never seen anyone put a third story on a house so fast. And they decided that, and I think their intent was to do the best they could do so that they would not have to undo it. So on Park Place, they did put a mansard back with 2 dormers. They're not horrible. But on Newton Place, because it's a corner house, there's no mansard at all. It's just a straight up wall. And that's kind of a point I get at, is if they had done this correctly, and if they had come up with an agreeable solution that preserved the original rooftop elements, it would not have been designed the way that they built it, meaning they had no intention from the very beginning to ever do the right thing. And this is someone who's already done work in the neighborhood and already gotten stop work orders on the house right next door. So they know people are watching and they know what the rules are. It's not like this is somebody that just decided that they're going to start being a developer yesterday.
No, actually, I think that's your argument right there, is that the design of the third story would not look like it does if they had intended to keep the roof.
Yeah. And I mean, even if you go on Google Street Views to see what the roof looked like before they started, I mean, I can't imagine the roof being so far gone or in such horrible condition that it needed to be removed. I mean, the slate wasn't missing, the bent tin around the dormers was in good condition, it wasn't rusted out. Certainly, knowing the people that lived there before they sold to the developer, they maintained their house reasonably well. It was not a dilapidated property. And I just think it's just a lie that Matt LeGrant decided to believe, frankly. Wow, it got quiet real fast.
I think everyone is in agreement, so perhaps.
Okay.
Think about
Well,
it.
if we're in agreement, then I'll hush, and I'll make a motion to what is it, to file a case,
An appeal.
An appeal with the BZA that the zoning commissioner has exceeded his authority.
And I'll second.
Okay, great, thank you. Any further discussion? Commissioner Goldschmidt, are you okay with that, doing something on principle?
Absolutely. I'm very happy to hear it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moved and seconded. Then all those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Okay, it looks like it's unanimous. Thank you so much, everybody. Commissioner Ray, I can't wait to hear your similar dilemma for 770 Park Road.
If Dom, you could bring up the plans. I'll wait for it to get on so people can see. And then if you could just scroll, oh, perfect. That's good.
Wait.
Oh, shoot. No, I think you're going to have to, yeah, keep it like that so they can see the green and the red. So so 770 Park Road may sound familiar to some of you who've been on the ANC for a long time. And it's the corner of Park Road and Sherman Avenue. It's an old, it was a large building that was run as an association that also did childcare and stuff like that. And so they came before us years ago to get approval to have retail on the first floor and then apartments or condos up above. The reason that I'm bringing this to you all is that I received a phone call from the developer back in February, and they called because you see the 2 parking spaces near the red box. Those 2 parking spaces were approved in the original plans. However, the lot line that you see there with the black and dotted line is where it is, and the parking spaces would have fit. However, the abutting neighbor has an old fence, an old wooden fence that goes across about 2 or 3 feet across the property line. That fence has been in place for more than 40 years. And they have proof of this. And so the owners were unable to convince them to remove the fence, and their lawyers advised them that they probably would not win if they attempted to force them to remove the fence. Well, this made those 2 parking spaces no longer fit. They left me with the impression that they just were going to remove the 2 parking spaces. They already had more than they needed for zoning, so they were going to apply. I didn't hear anything more about it until just the other week when the neighbors to the south, so now we're looking below the green, the neighbors to the south called me to say, we were contacted by the same developer who asked, would we be willing to waive part of our easement, which you see in the green, would we waive that easement so that they could fit the 2 parking spaces in the same basic way, and cut away a part of the easement. Well, they never agreed to do that, and they never heard anything back. And so now the property has received its certificate of occupancy, and nobody knows quite what happened with these parking spaces. I contacted the developer to find out what the outcome was, and they didn't return. I sent a message to Matt LeGrant on Friday to ask him, how did this get resolved? What did they reconfigure them? What did they do? And he hasn't responded. So time, unfortunately, is ticking, and we only have a certain amount of time to submit an appeal if I don't get an answer that is satisfactory to the neighbors. So my request of this commission would be to allow me to also file an appeal if I don't get an answer that explains how they dealt with these spaces, because the suspicion might be that the spaces are in the easement and they shouldn't be, and the neighbors aren't happy about that. So I'll try to answer your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Ray. Any questions about this from commissioners? I'll be pretty direct, Commissioner Ray. One, I'm supportive, but I also am curious. What specifically are we appealing?
So the appeal,
loss of the 2 spaces, or
no,
the fact that
the
spaces
appeal
are
is,
in the easement?
Yeah, it's an appeal of the certificate of occupancy,
Okay.
which was given to the house. In this case, in that C of O does specifically call out 8 parking spaces, including 2 compacts. So it's in the description of the C of O that all these spaces actually exist, when, as we can see, in this map, by the way, that we have here, actually came from the developer. So they've either redone it in a way that works, or the spaces are not legit.
Okay, I just want clarification on what's being appealed.
Correct, yeah. It would be an appeal of the certificate of occupancy.
Okay.
And that those spaces don't actually exist.
If in fact they only exist by falling into the easement that the other neighbors have not approved, correct. That would be,
So that would,
yes.
Yeah, that would be an illegal parking space. And I think, don't easements have to be registered? I mean, don't they have to go down to the DC deeds, Office of Deeds, in order to do an easement?
And records, absolutely. So my thinking, okay.
If they didn't do that, then they have violated the law intentionally. And you guys know how fed up I am with these people who are continually, deliberately defying the law and designing as they so feel that they can get away with. And Mr. LeBlanc needs to have his head examined if he keeps allowing this kind of stuff to happen under his watch.
I agree with you, Commissioner Wade, absolutely. I think that there's an irony here of bad planning on behalf of the property owner, but I don't think that the current owner of 770 is the one that did it per se, although they're the ones that are trying to get around something. But I think it's ironic that 770 Park Road and the newish flats that are just to the south of them, that was all originally one lot that was subdivided to create those new row houses. And so their failure to split the property correctly has created their own problem.
You're right. But it was all done at different times, so. It
was done at different times, but it was still very poor planning. I mean, when they built those row houses and they split the lots and they created the easement, it was specifically so that those row houses could have off-street parking. And they should have platted the property better so that there wasn't this easement problem. I mean, granted, the current owners of 770 bought it after it was subdivided, but it would have been the same problem if the original owner had kept it, because that was the whole purpose of the easement, is to get access to the off-street parking, which they now want to somehow take back.
Yes, and that easement basically creates an alleyway, which is, their concern is that it makes it hard for them to turn around in order, because the DDOT does not want anyone to be backing out of that alleyway. They want you to be facing forward. So that whole back end is kept open so that you can literally turn around and then come back out facing forward. So unless there's another question, I'm prepared to make a motion.
I think we're all prepared to hear a motion.
Okay, so I would move that should I not get an explanation of how this was resolved, that I would be able to file an appeal of the certificate of occupancy to try and resolve this parking dilemma.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We may either you need to get me back to the Brady Bunch view, or we're going to have to take a roll call vote.
There we go.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor, raise your hands or say aye.
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 There we go. Just in case, any abstentions? Any noes? There we go. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, commissioners. Commissioner Miller, would you like to introduce the final item on the official business, which is testimony regarding the mental health and related supports and public safety? Oh, actually, it's Miller, Bonneau, and Castagnan. Sorry about that. So who wants to start? Commissioner Bonneau, Castagnan, or Miller?
I'll go ahead and introduce it. First off, I want to just check with everybody to make sure, and again, I apologize, we're not in person, so it's hard to get hard copies to folks. Commissioner Love Wade, I wanted to make sure you were able to link in through Google. I didn't hear that anyone wasn't able to look at this document and review.
Yes, I saw it.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is a draft testimony that I've put together for submission to the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety, as well as submitting to the Committee on Health and Human Services. I'll just run through if that's okay with everybody. So the annual budget process, as I've talked about, as many people have talked about, is this really important time in our city to really look at and reflect what our values are and how we fund those and prioritize our residents. So looking at FY21, the FY21 budget as an opportunity for the leadership of our city to better meet the needs of our most vulnerable community members, especially those that we know have been and will be further directly and disproportionately impacted by COVID. Before we were able to see the mayor's budget, you'll all recall that we did, as a commission, support a letter identifying some key priority areas to really speak to the needs of our families and our youth. So while this is certainly not exhaustive, I am asking the committees to, as they're reviewing their budgets with the agencies and offices under their purview, and asking the members of those committees, asking the DC Council to really start redefining and rethinking what public safety looks like in our city and in our communities, and move towards a version that begins to center solutions on investments that in our youth, in our families, and of course in our community. Again, sort of referencing back to the original letter where we prioritized or identified some priorities. We know that this is a broad need, and this conversation certainly needs to be very comprehensive. That includes investments in affordable housing, access to high quality childcare, food security, investments in our education system, access to capital. So we know that there are a wide array of issues, but just sort of in an effort to focus, looking at one of the underlying challenges faced by youth is a need for stronger and more intentional support for physical and mental health programs. So again, this is an ongoing conversation that I've had within the education committee, both through our continued push and support for these mental health trauma supports, but also working with and lifting up all of the important and critical work that we see happening by our community partners and the direct services that they're providing in support to our youth, but also our families and broader community. So looking at funding priorities and how do we push to sort of create and support investments that will have a meaningful outcome. I pulled out, and again, we had talked about this at our committee as a whole, and some of the challenges of really breaking down the entire budget and the behavioral health needs, the mental health supports, the community-based supports. So I sort of lumped them into some pools, if you will. Again, reiterating the push for mental health professionals, especially those that are supporting our students, with the greatest needs. The current budget has $1.5 million going towards in-school supports. However, those are not new dollars. They're transferring the federal funding coming in through the CARES Act to replace local funds. So that's leaving funding flat at a time where we know that thousands of kids are going to be struggling even more so and have a greater need for mental health professionals and the support that they're going to provide when our youth and when our kids are back in seat, but also to sort of help them straddle that space. For anyone who might not know, our schools are already reaching out to families and doing tele support, as well as support at Mary Center and other organizations that are really helping our families through this difficult time. And what we of course know will be difficult even once we reopen fully. It's a push for evidence-based social and emotional learning programs that are high quality, that are culturally affirming, and responsive, along, again, with that trauma-informed training and restorative practices in our schools. And something we had as a commission also identified is the Healthy Futures program. Again, just highlighting the need to fund that. This program and the expansion of it was passed in 2018 through that Birth to 3 for All DC Act, but we're still not seeing it funded. So great in theory, doesn't do anybody any good if there isn't any money to implement it. And a final pool that I think, again, as we're talking about partnerships, as we're talking about a more comprehensive approach, is making sure that our community services division and our community-based providers are kept whole, since we know those are going to be key to prevention, early intervention, and all of those ripple supports that we know we're going to need, not just for youth, but also for our adults, for our families, even for our immigrant community. And I got a little wonky, and so I apologize that this is not area of expertise, so I really had to lean into our policy analysts that are doing the great work, and identified that this particular division is looking at a cut of $33 million which is down 22.5%. Now, that's going to be parsed out over a variety of different areas and programs and line items. But one of the things that I thought was really important to pull out and identify, which is the Medicaid eligible services. So when the district is cutting $1, it becomes more amplified when we don't, and families don't receive the reimbursement, and providers are not receiving those reimbursements. So overall, it's really looking at this as a comprehensive support. It's really recognizing that if we want to talk equity, if we really want to talk and move towards solutions that are systemic as well as, you know, preventative and interventative. I don't know if that's a word, I apologize. That we're going to have to step up on critical service agencies. They're the ones with the expertise. They're the ones that are best equipped to serve our community. And they're the ones that are going to have those lasting and meaningful changes in the communities that need it the most. And then of course, across our city. So, you know, I'm throwing this to our Committee on Justice and Public Safety. We know that they're dealing with a particular bloated budget that I would like to see them tapping into to support some of these more holistic and comprehensive services. So I guess that would be it in a nutshell. Any questions? And I hope I was not on mute that whole time.
No, you were not.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I think you outlined it well, Commissioner. I know that there are two other commissioners who worked with you on this. So if they have things to add, I'd certainly enjoy hearing that. Otherwise, we will move to any comments or questions.
Commissioner
Yeah,
Miller?
I'm happy to.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Please.
Sorry. I just want to thank Commissioner Miller for all her work on this, and just kind of echo how important our role as a commission is right now. I think it was great that we had that moment of reflection and statement of solidarity in the beginning, but that this is really another way that we can take direct action and impact and support our community. And so just appreciate everybody's leadership, and definitely welcome comments and feedback. I think we're close to final, but I know there's still some lingering edits and things that we're going to clean up before it gets to committee. So welcome that. And I appreciate that we also are linking to some of our other work that we've done as a commission, as well as like centering this in our community. So I know Commissioner Miller mentioned at the end, I think it's on the last page, where we call out some of our community partners. But just really emphasizing that piece as well. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to interject. I just want to add, yes, to me, you know, I'm sure you've all heard me enough to know just how incredibly invaluable our community partners are in providing the resources, not just, you know, not just physically, not just financially, but the trust and that long-term relationship that they've developed with a lot of individuals and a lot of groups and families that, you know, even at the school level or at these other levels that we might operate, we don't have that history trust built up. And it's just, they've just been key in making sure that we're getting to the best of our ability and, you know, resources where they need to get, linking those supports with the individuals who may not feel comfortable just, you know, walking into the door at a, you know, at the school or a doctor's office or a government office for sure. I mean, that one is a big one for many in our community. as well. So I just want to take the opportunity to applaud them. They're just phenomenal, and they've been great with working with everybody on this commission.
And thank you all for working on this. I really appreciate in particular that you include something that I think has been happening for decades, which is as city governments have had to make difficult financial choices. Historically, it's been easy for them to cut funding for social services and youth services and mental health and what have you, because I don't think that there have in the past been the advocacy at how critically important these are. And the result has been that when there's a call for service over the decades, that by default, that just bumps to MPD. And I don't think that these are police problems. These should not be police problems. Like in many of these instances, I don't think that is who should be showing up to respond to the issue. So I'm just saying that I'm very appreciative that you included some language about that backslide over the years, and then choices to use officers to fill a gap that never should have occurred to begin with.
This is Commissioner Brown. Thank you so much, commissioners, for drafting this testimony on behalf of the commission. And thank you so much for laying out some of the key issues that our communities are facing as a result of this global pandemic. I think I mentioned this earlier in response to the previous testimony, Commissioner Miller, that you drafted, particularly on after-school programming and other youth services. I think that mental health services right now are particularly needed. And we, like I said before, we may not know, we may not have all of the data right now because the impacts of COVID-19 are fairly new. But we can assume and make a great assumption that we're going to need to have those investments in the budget and that they will be put to good use. And as you know, and I think that you raised some great issues around those that are disproportionately impacted by the global pandemic, and also by our recent racially driven events that have happened in our community and communities across the nation. But I'm wondering if, just to make the testimony stronger, if you can call that out, particularly the racial and ethnic disparities that our communities are facing, especially in ANC 1A, when we're incredibly diverse, and our neighborhood has experienced the highest rates of COVID-19, and we'll experience some heavy economic impacts related to jobs, housing, childcare, sustainable employment. So I'm just hoping that if you could include any local data around that, or even national data that the CDC has put out there, just kind of recognizing the racial disparities that are connected to this global pandemic, but also another layer of the racially charged events that have been happening and the trauma that our African Americans particularly have been facing.
Yeah, I mean, I know, and this was a conversation Commissioner Bonneau and I had gone back and forth, and we did reference the COVID demographic, but I think, to your point, pulling out, one of the things I also didn't put in, but it may be in my comments or maybe it's still in my head, was really talking about the displacement challenges as well. And maybe in some of these, and this will be exacerbated through COVID and the economic challenges and economic insecurity that our families are going to have.
I agree, but definitely don't be afraid just to call out some of the racial and ethnic disparities.
Right.
There's data connected to that, particularly CDC has put out there. I mean, it's in the research, it's embedded in data.
Do we have that in DC? Does anybody know?
We have it, yeah, we have it as the first footnote, but I think to Commissioner Brown's point, we can just pull it out and up into the letter, into the testimony and make it more explicit. We call out that Columbia Heights has the greatest number of cases in the city as well, but happy to just be more explicit.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think Commissioner Castañón was trying to jump in.
Thanks, Commissioner Bonneau. Actually, my comment or question was already addressed. Thank you.
Thank you all for drafting this. I know one thing I've forwarded to you beforehand, and I would encourage you to add is continued funding for the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement as part of community-based providers. I can add some of the budget lines that were cut in our comments or in the Zoom chat if that's easiest, but I would encourage you to add that after you list some of the community service providers like LEYC and Mary Center.
Zach, can you forward those to me and help me, and just, if you wouldn't mind, just adding the language in directly?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Are there other commissioners with comments on this? I'm scrolling, I'm not seeing any. And I'm looking and I'm not seeing any hands from attendees. So I think it sounds like everyone who has a question or wanted to speak has. Now would be the time to let me know if that's not the case. All right, then is there a motion on the floor?
I move that ANC 1A accept this testimony as for submission on behalf of our commission to both the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety and the Committee on Health and Human Services. And can I throw in the Committee of the Whole as well?
You can give it to every committee you want to.
Great, I'm gonna throw them in as well, just so we're in a, you know, and anybody else, anybody wants to throw it on.
The original pile-on. Okay, so that's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Okay, that sounds like everybody. So no abstentions, no objections. The motion passes. That brings us to the end of the agenda. So is there a motion to close the meeting?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
All right, that's two motions to close the meetings equates to a second. So all those in favor say aye.
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 Yeah. Any abstention? Okay. Then that brings our meeting of ANC 1A to a close for June 10th at 8:54 p.m. Thank you.
Jason, I'm going to call you.
Okay.
Jason, this is Dottie. I'm going to give you a call.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.